And welcome back to ConTinual. It's another round of Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the people that are bringing them to you. So tonight we've got a couple of brand new authors and some brand new releases coming out the door. So before we get started, let's go around the room and see who's here with all the new toys and stuff to add to your to be read pile. So Samantha, you're up top if you want to go first.
Sure. Hi there. I am Samantha Bryant. I write the Menopausal Superheroes series, and the book I'm here to tell you about today is the fourth book in the series, Be the Change, which came out in December. And I guess I'll get a chance to tell you some more about it later on, so that'll be good for now.
Yeah, and we've been hearing about this book coming for a while, so it's about time that one came out.
I know. Now I'm trying to write the fifth one.
Dan, what you got?
My name is Dan Jolley. I write a bunch of different kinds of things. Started out in comic books and got into novels and video games and a little bit of screenwriting here and there. And my most recent release is The Rune Master Homicide, which is my first ever fantasy novel. So I'm going to be talking a lot about this, my first ever fantasy novel tonight.
See, brand new shiny stuff. And BL, what have you got?
Hi, I'm BL Maxwell. I write paranormal, contemporary. I've written a little bit of paranormal fantasy, kind of a little bit of everything, all with characters. My latest release is Freezing Aversion, which is a paranormal vampire story. So it's kind of fun. They're traditional, but not really traditional vampires. So a little bit different.
And since we're sitting in the middle of a snowstorm, at least on this side of the country, you know, well timed.
It works.
So let's kind of go around and talk a little bit about the new releases, you know, give a little bit of backstory. What can everybody look to expect? So Samantha, how about you? You know, maybe a little bit about the greater menopausal superheroes universe, as well as the long anticipated fourth book in the series.
So the Menopausal Superhero series came about because I got frustrated watching X-Men movies. So I've always been a superhero fan, but the older that I got, the harder it became for me to connect well to footloose and fancy-free teenagers with no responsibilities who could just skip algebra to go learn to manage their new powers. And I forget which X-Men movie we had watched, but my husband and I had watched one of the X-Men movies, and we were out walking with the dog. And I said that, you know, the real moral of the story for that one seemed to be that with puberty comes superpowers. And I said, well, if that's the case, if hormones cause superpowers, then menopausal superheroes, menopausal women should have the corner on that market. And he laughed and he said, oh, that's a fantastic idea. You should write it down. And here I am 6 years later, still writing it down. The first book was called Going Through the Change, and is how the women got their powers. And then we go through different kinds of stories from there. Be the Change, the most recent one, takes Patricia, the lizard woman of Springfield, and sends her back to Indiana, where she's from, because her mother's gone missing. And making her go back to small town Indiana is just about the meanest thing I could have done to Patricia. So it was great fun to write, and I hope readers will love it too.
So Dan, another one that you've been talking about for a while that was coming. So let's find out a little bit about this new one.
Well, this is the protagonist in the background behind me here, Niska Stonegate. It's an original fantasy setting, and in this world, the Valkonian Empire has been using rune-based magic to solve crimes for 300 years. I was a little bit inspired by some of the stuff that I heard about Vlad Tepes, how he was like a real law and order kind of guy. Like you could leave a sack of gold out on your stoop and it would still be there in the morning because everyone was so terrified of him. No one would break any laws. So with the rune-based crime solving, no one ever gets away with anything, ever. So on the rare occasion when someone does finally succumb to like a crime of passion or something, they are immediately caught and usually immediately executed. But then something begins happening that deteriorates that magic. Well, Niska here is the first ever non-human member of the Imperial Criminal Investigation Ministry. So her people don't have any kind of magic. And so she has to be the one to say, well, you're going to have to use actual detective procedures to solve these crimes. And all the Imperials are like, but what are you talking about? That's not how we do things. It's, and her people kept to themselves for a really long time until a natural disaster killed most of them and forced the rest of them to become refugees. So it's a story about what it means to be human in a lot of ways. And it's also like a detective procedural in a high fantasy, magic using, sword wielding kind of setting.
So I do have to tell you this because I just saw it a little while ago today. Talking about Vlad Tepes was a little cartoon that shows him learning to play with marshmallows on a stick.
I've seen that cartoon. And he's like, oh, this is fantastic.
You'll have to work that into the next book. So
I love it.
So BL, let's find out a bit about your not traditional vampires.
Well, they're traditional, but they're not. So they have a ruling class of vampires that they're there to protect the vampires, because in this world there are vampires, but they're kind of rare because they're humans kind of outpower them. Basically, they outpower them and outnumber them. So they have sent this, they don't like vampires to stand out at all. So they get a report of this vampire that's causing trouble in a remote village in Alaska. So they send Ben Colton, he's a tracker for them. So they send him up there to find this vampire. And when he gets there, it's snowing real heavy and he's just like, oh God, hopefully I can get this done fast and get out of here. And that doesn't happen, of course. So he finds a newborn vampire that's just blood, crazed, out of control, doesn't know what he is, doesn't know anything. And they're not really supposed to help newborns. They're supposed to destroy newborns. You're not supposed to just create and leave or create at all. So now he has to not only try to find the guy that he was after, but also figure out why this newborn is there and decide if he should help him or destroy him. And eventually he realizes, well, maybe I'll help him, because they're stuck in the middle of nowhere. So he can't really cause too much damage, where they're at. So he ends up helping them. And then both of them start working to find this other vampire that's gone rogue. And even though he can track him, the other vampire has I don't want to give it away, but he has an ability where he can mask himself. So it's not easy to track him. So it kind of makes it everything happens within just a few days because he's basically trying to track this guy and not being able to. And in the meantime, in this world, they feed on each other. They're not really supposed to, and they can kill each other by that. So they're trying to, they're all trying to avoid each other. It's just a lot of action back and forth of them trying to avoid each other, but then find him and destroy him in the middle of the wilderness in a huge snowstorm. So it was a lot of fun to write.
So let's talk a little bit more about our protagonists. Who are our heroes? Because every story, we love the settings, we love the world building, things like that. But at the end of the day, it's all about who are the people, because that's who we connect with as readers. So let's talk a little bit here, because I know. So Samantha, in this latest one, you've been working with and with, as you say, your lizard lady. What is it about her that drew in, that A, brought you to give her these sets of powers, and B, sets her off on this particular mystery? Because I think when we talked about this a while back, it is a lot of family drama in here as well, because she's got to go home.
So when I started inventing menopausal superheroes, I started with common menopausal complaints and kind of worked from there. And so like the very first character I invented for the series was Helen Brayburn. And she was having hot flashes. And after she got involved with a mad scientist, those hot flashes became a lot more literal, and she was able to wield fire, which she found out by accidentally burning down her apartment. And for Patricia, the lizard woman of Springfield, I gave her one of my own complaints, which is try itchy skin. It is no fun. And another thing I was trying to do was make sure that my characters came from several different walks of life. It's definitely an ensemble piece. There's 3 main heroes and a couple of antagonists that make the core group, that's been the core group for all of the books. And, I've got a range of whether they're married or not, whether they have kids or not, whether they're career people or not, how old they are. Like Jessica, Fly Girl, is way younger than the other menopausal superheroes, because the reason she went through menopause is that she's a cancer survivor. So she was only 32 when she went through menopause, and was dealing with the grief that she wouldn't be able to have any more children because she actually still wanted to, and that kind of thing. So I tried to bring in a lot of different things, and I really like my whole ensemble. And as I've worked with them, the changes in their relationships with each other have been fun, like developing friendships and having different kinds of conflicts between them as they learn to work together and deal with all of their different things, and the way they've come to care for each other. And Patricia in the 4th book here is the real focus, and she consistently is a good character to work with because she's just so darn prickly. And she's very much a reluctant hero. She didn't set out to save anybody, but she kind of got roped into it. And in a way, she reminds me of Wolverine, who's one of my favorite comic book heroes, in that it's so rough and nasty seeming on the outside, but just a secret marshmallow, and keeps telling you they don't care, and they keep telling you don't care because it's themselves they're trying to convince that they don't care. So
the good news is she can mix fire in that marshmallow to toast at any time. So Dan, how about you? Bringing forth, a whole original world, and creating in essence a whole brand new species as well to work with and play with. So
Yeah, it occurs to me, I think I forgot to mention the title of the actual book. I mean, I know I held it up. It's called The Rune Master Homicide, book 1 of a series that's going to be called the Demon Sleuth Scrolls. And Niska is part of a species known as the Sethids, S-E-T-H-Y-D, Sethid. But all of the humans call them demons because they look like this. They all have violet skin and horns of various shapes and sizes, and yellow to orange to red eyes. And somewhere around 2010, I apparently lost the ability to write a novel without a female protagonist. I was as surprised as anybody else. Like it started when I pitched a story that had a guy as a lead, and the publisher was like, "We like this, but can you make the lead a girl?" And I said, "I don't know. Let me give it a shot." And to the surprise of myself, as more than anybody else, I apparently am not bad at writing female characters. My wife says that my inner child is a 13-year-old girl. It's fine with me. But Niska arose from a number of different sources. And if I'm completely honest, a little bit of it is how much I love Skyrim. Forget I said that. I really, really, really like, and it's become kind of a dangerous thing to say, but okay, rather than strong, I'll say powerful female characters. And a big chunk of this is how often people just resent the hell out of women who are really, really good at something. And a lot of the time it's just like good at anything, but especially like executive level, women who deserve to be in charge. And God, people just hate that. And so the humans really just kind of resent the hell out of the entire Sethid species because they are all really tall, really, really, really strong and fast and smarter than humans. They're just kind of better than humans. And through various circumstances, Niska really has no choice but to join this human organization and lend her skill. Well, actually, to begin with, she's not supposed to be a detective. She's supposed to be the enforcer on the team. She's the one that carries the big axe, and when someone's head needs to come off, she's the one that takes it off. But when her team begins to be faced with this situation where the magic that they use doesn't work, then she really has no choice but to step up and say, I think I can figure this out if you'll let me. So yeah, she just kind of gets more and more involved from there. And I love her a lot.
How about you, BL?
So my main character is Ben Colton, is the tracker. And he actually was in the first book in the series where he helps the other main character of that one figure out kind of what's going on with the whole mystery, in the first book. And so he's very good at tracking. I know I said that, but he's also very curious and he wants to get to the bottom of it all. And so in doing this, even though there's only, there's this other guy that has been turned, and then the guy that he's looking for, and then there's another vampire that is also there that kind of falls into this by accident. And they all kind of look to Ben for, well, what do we do? What is really happening, thinking he knows it all because he works for the consortium, but he doesn't know it all. And then the more they find out, the more they realize that, or he realizes that what he believes to be true isn't true. And the whole organization isn't the organization that he's, basically built his career on, and lived his life according to their rules. It's not at all what he thinks it is. So it's, he changes a lot, I would say, through it, because he goes from someone who he's, very confident and knows his job and he's just there to do his job, to someone that, one of the guys ends up being his mate. He never thought he had a mate. So this surprises him, and he's just, a lot of things happen that make him reassess his situation and the reality he thinks he's in.
So the other big part, and one of those things that is so much fun about writing in, that fantasy space, when you get to take the worlds world building is one of the fun things that we get to do as authors, is come up with, how do we get to take and create the world and set the rules that people are going to get to play in, and because that's another one of those fun things. And so Dan, since you probably have gone the furthest afield in creating and building a new universe, what other elements did you pull in? What really creates the world and the universe your characters are living in?
Well, this is the most ambitious thing I've ever tried to do, and I'm trying to be very much aware that it's a perfect opportunity to really screw it up really bad. In fact, as part of an attempt not to screw things up, I'm consulting with a sociologist, because the Sethid culture is really different from humans, and a lot of it is because of the way they're physically put together. All Sethid men and women are the same size. They all have exactly the same strength level. All Sethid women are in complete control of when they do or do not get pregnant. All Sethid births are twins. Every time a woman gives birth, it's a twin, and it's a boy and a girl, brother and sister, and they have an amazing bond, lasts all their lives. And when a Sethid woman decides to take a lover and get pregnant, she and her brother raised the kid. And the guy can stick around if they both want him to, or not. Just some really basic, really fundamental differences like that. It turns their culture into something very, very different from the like Bronze Age human culture. I mean, to get exactly how the humans got the way they are, you'll have to read the book. It's just been like a huge thought exercise, really trying to build this new non-human culture up from ground level. So far so good. And you know, I'm kind of hoping that some like academic type somewhere gets their hands on it and does some kind of critical analysis and maybe points out something I've missed. Yeah, like up until this point, everything else that I've written has either been like science fiction or a little bit of horror or just very much grounded real world stuff. So this is my first ever original, completely new world. And it's been a lot of fun. It's daunting and, you know, a little bit scary, but I'm loving it. It's there will be many books.
Excellent. How about you, BL? So how close would your world be to ours? Do they know the vampires exist? How much is hidden? How much is known?
It's in our world. It's all in our world. And it's more so in the first one because they're in Eureka. And what happens in that one is vampires are giving drugs to drug addicts and they're really strong drugs. So they overdose. And when they overdose, then vampires feed on them so they can get some buzz, you know, from the drugs because they don't really work on them. So this is going on, but in the human world, like one of the main characters, ER doctor. And so he starts noticing there's all these humans coming in that they've OD'd, you know, and the drugs, they're like, my God, what are they giving them? Because they're just, you know, no one can survive this. And so it kind of ties it to the real world there. And the humans are oblivious to it, you know, and as far as like the drug addicts, they like it because they're like, well, these people are giving us drugs, you know, they don't really care so much about, they don't know what's going on, so they don't really care. In the second one, there's no humans other than the man that's changed. And he's very confused because he doesn't realize at all what's happened to him. And you find out, you know, that the vampire tortured him and his friend for days, you know, just kind of fed off him and, you know, just was horrible to him for a few days. And he has no memory of that though. So even when they go back to where this happened, he still has no memory. So there's not really a blending of the worlds. It's in our world, but they exist like parallel to our world. You know what I mean? They can come into our world, but only if they have to. They don't really want to, but they still, you know, they like blood, so they have to a little bit.
Got to go get takeout.
Yes, that's right.
How about you, Samantha?
So similarly, the menopausal superhero series takes place in something close to our own world. But, you know, whenever you're introducing fantasy, sci-fi kinds of elements, then you get to set the rules for that. You know, like, is this a world where superheroes are a known element and these are just some new superheroes or whatever? And so I've gone with a world that doesn't have any superheroes that are out there yet, but people are aware of the whole concept. Like, unlike in like Harry Potter, where I'm always like, no one in Harry Potter ever read a book about wizards. You know, they seem to have no idea that these are out there at all. The concept of superheroes exists for people in my novels, but this is the first time that there have been actual people with freaky skills. And so I got to play with, with that and trying to play with the idea of superheroes and secret identities and, organizations and all of that stuff to try to give my spin on things. Because one thing that has always annoyed me is the lone hero trope. The idea that if you're going to live a heroic life of some measure, it must mean that nobody can love you, or if they do, we're going to kill them, right? And that you're in this on your own, and you push people away from you emotionally to protect them and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't want that for my heroes. I wanted them to have families and friends and communities and relationships. And so there's not a single one of the menopausal heroes who keeps their secret to themselves. Like, they're small circles, and some of them are more protective of their identity than others. You know, since Patricia can literally transform herself and choose how, the way she puts it is letting her lizard alter ego out. And there are levels of out, right? She can just kind of have light scaling, or she can be fully armored with spikes and scare the crap out of you. And so she, you know, goes out in different levels, but she's not really made much effort necessarily. She's not announcing that she's the lizard woman of Springfield, but when people figure it out, she figures that's inevitable. Whatever, she's bulletproof, she can take care of it. Whereas, you know, Jessica has young children at home. She's very protective of her secret identity. You know, she wears a mask and a cowl with fake hair that make you think that the general coloration of her features are different than they actually are, to try to make it harder for anybody to guess who they are. So those are the kind of the elements you get to play with, is a relationship with real world kinds of search and rescue and police and firemen and all that, and how this organization of these specially skilled peoples integrates with those real world things. So I think I try to stay reasonably close to real, allowing for things like, you know, somebody who can renegotiate their relationship with gravity.
Gravity's not just a good idea, it's usually the law. So, you know, one of the fun things is in being a writer and working in this genre, I mean, is writing mysteries where you get to play with how do the laws of physics work? How do, you know, how, when you introduce magic into systems, when you get to do these things that break the rules or at least bend them a lot. You know, so if we look at these series, but just kind of even in general, when you're talking about building these worlds, building these characters, building these conflicts, you know, from a greater extent, and you can pull into these books, you can pull out of other stuff you've done, or you can just even pull out of genres and things that you like and you're a fan of. What is it for you in the process of looking at and building these worlds and building the mysteries? Because at the end of the day, you still have to have some problem to solve to pull the story along. What is it in that really appeals to you? And what are the things that really are core for you to tell a good story? So Bill, I'll start with you on that one.
Well, for me, I always will have a happy ending, always. But I want them to go through a little bit, you know, and have to work together. And a lot of times I'll have two characters that don't necessarily get along, or they don't really want anything to do with each other, and make them have to get along. And, you know, like in this one, Benjamin, he wants nothing to do with this newborn vampire. You know, it's like you're babysitting, you know, you have to teach him. I mean, the guy shows up at his cabin, he has no shoes on, and he's running in the snow. And he doesn't question, because he's a newborn, he doesn't even question, you know, that he needs shoes. And, you know, they're vampires, so they can run in the snow. It doesn't, you know, it's not going to hurt them or anything. And so a lot of it too was kind of figuring out their vampire side, and how much is things they do because they still remember some things of their human life, and things that they'll do for comfort just because they did it as a human, but they don't necessarily need as a vampire. So that for me is a lot of fun, kind of looking at both sides of it. And it's funny because I had a few people mention that it bothered them, the running through the snow barefoot. But to me, it was just kind of a, they're showing that they can do anything. It's not going to hurt them doing this. But then when they fight each other, they're lethal to each other because they can kill each other, but the environment itself can't hurt them. So that for me in this book was a big part, was the environment was not so much their enemy, but it should be, you know what I mean? It's kind of a hindrance to them, I guess you'd say.
How about you, Samantha?
So I think it's probably true for a lot of different kinds of books, and other media probably too, that your work doesn't exist like by itself. It exists in relationship with and response to other works. And so I certainly didn't invent the concept of superheroes. I'm just giving my spin on it. And I think in that way, that's kind of where a lot of the stories start, is the whole, as I already said, the whole concept started with a frustration I had with the superhero stories I was being offered, that everybody was 17, had no responsibilities. I wanted to see what it was like if you gave adults with lives powers, and then they had to deal with that alongside the things like their children and their jobs and all of that. So that's definitely part of things for me. And the biggest theme across the whole series is definitely about friendship, and it's about the importance of friendship in your lives, maybe especially for women. Male friendship features less in my books. as a joke I make about my books is that they would fail a reverse Bechdel test. There are very few men in the book, and if they're there for the women. They're not really necessarily important on their own. So there's that female friendship angle. At the heart of it, you've got Patricia and Cindy, who have been friends since they were young, and they weren't young when the series started, so they'd already been friends for like 30 years, maybe 40 years even, when the books actually start. And then Cindy is the antagonist. She's the mad scientist who causes everything. And Patricia feels betrayed and feels like all of their years of friendship are called into question now. Has this person ever been who I thought they were? And Patricia's not the kind of woman who has a lot of friends, because she's difficult. And so that continues to come on through and is still important in this fourth book. And I think as I said, I'm trying to write the fifth book right now, and that's the part I'm wrestling with, is how to wind all that around, because I'd really like the fifth book to be the final book. I love these guys, but I do have other things I want to write too. So those themes of friendship and relationships are definitely core to it, but I still also want a kick-ass superhero story. I still want cool fights where people do impossible things and you go, ooh, neat.
How about you, Dan?
Well, yeah, I've been writing professionally for a long time now. I sold my first comic book script when I was still in college, and for a long time, I really just wanted to write like stories that were as cinematic as I could make them, where big explodey things happened. Just the kind of thing that would make readers say, "Oh, that was so cool." And somewhere around like maybe age 40, I began to grow up a little, maybe.
That's bad for a writer. Grow up.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to deal with it, but I started to realize that like stories ought to have a point to them as well. And so like that's been the the focus that I've been trying to work on. Like I also have some superhero novels. In fact, Samantha and I are two of three novelists at Falstaff Books that have superhero novels out. I have a trilogy called the Grey Widow trilogy, and I realized about a third of the way through that the whole thing was about how violence just breeds violence, and that unrestrained violence is not going to do any good and will probably do a lot of harm in the long run. I wrote a very much real world mystery thriller called The Storm, set in a small Northwest Georgia town that turned out to be about racism. I mean, you know, if you've ever been to a small Northwest Georgia town, that's not a stretch. Then the Rune Master Homicide, it's like a kind of a commentary on society. It's like, if I do it right, what I'm attempting, at least aspiring to, is pointing out some of the things that are incredibly systemically unfair about the society we live in, and highlighting it by offering a culture that doesn't have those weaknesses. So yeah, I'm trying to make points and be like responsible, but I still want to read it. Huh?
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I still want readers to say, "Oh my God, that was so cool." You know, and I think I'm achieving that. The feedback that I've gotten is that there are a lot of "oh hell yeah" moments in the books, and usually my stories also involve lightning and bears. For whatever reason, it's the way it turns out.
Can the
So
bears
what I was
cast
gonna say is
lightning?
that
I just have
I
to
often-
know.
What was
Go
that?
ahead, Samantha.
Oh, I was going to say that I often find out what's bothering me way back in my subconscious when I write something. Like I didn't sit down to write about ageism, and I didn't sit down to write about sexism. For goodness sake, I wanted to have fun. You know, I actually sat down to write these in contrast to the first novel I ever wrote, one that I don't plan to inflict on people. It's that novel you write to learn how to write a novel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, but you know, that one was so serious and so dark. And I promised myself, when I was trying to bribe myself to finish it, I promised myself I would write something fun. And fun is still definitely at the heart of what I'm after in a lot of my writing. But I am a thinking person, even if sometimes I don't acknowledge what I'm thinking about. And I have often found after I finish writing something or partway through the writing, I go, oh, this is a reaction to that bad medical experience you had. And oh, is that your ex-husband over there? You know, there's I have a friend who said that novel writing is the most naked art, and it is often really accidentally confessional. And sometimes you can learn as much about the author as about their imagination from their books.
Yeah, it's a common thing. Like people who know me, who read something that I've written, they're like, "Oh, I could hear you saying this in your voice," which I apologize for.
I've had the exact same thing happen with friends of mine go and say, I can absolutely, and in some cases they go and say, I have heard you say that snarky line to me. So you know, one of the best things, I think this is kind of where we're going with this, is being a writer means we get to explore ourselves, our interests, our worlds, and you know, let us go deeper. And sometimes, even if it's the subconscious processing the things we want to take a look at. So it's always about what are the things that we learn from the next book and the next book and the next book and the next story and the next story and the next story. What's the one thing that you learned, whether it was about yourself, about writing, about craft, whatever it was? And, you know, I think Dan learned a lot, it sounds like, in getting into the sociology and playing with this one. But what's the number one thing that you take away almost as the gift of learning from this particular book and experience? Who wants to go first with that one?
I don't know if I learned anything from this book. That's kind of the fun of paranormal. You can just be as wild as you want to be.
No fun research rabbit holes?
Not with this one. Not with this one, not that I can think of anyway. I know usually there's some random thing. I know what it was because I wanted the main character to have kind of a weird background, because I always feel like I have to give him some background. And so he, in the first book, it's never told where he is from originally, and all of them come from somewhere. But he actually was from the Roanoke colony. Just because I wanted it to be we went there actually one time, so I always try to use places I've been to. I really like doing that. So that was kind of his origin story. He was part of the Roanoke
The
colony.
Lost Colony.
Yes, the Lost Colony. So I don't know if it was research, but
Yeah, but now you can write that trip off on your taxes. So
that's right. That's right.
So I know for this one, for Be the Change, the fourth one, that's the new release, that idea of going home again and of not feeling like you belong in the place that you are from. Those are definitely feelings that I have. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky, 4 blocks from Ohio, and a very urban suburban kind of upbringing, and a very blue collar kind of town. And I never felt like I belonged there. And, I hit the ground running when I could leave. I went 2 hours away for college because that was kind of as far as my family was willing to let me go. And then when I graduated college, I moved to Alaska. So I got as far out of there as I could, and took a long time to, feel like I could establish myself separately. And those are all threads that I found in Patricia. And again, I didn't set out to write about any of those feelings. That's not what I set out to do, but they're there. And that's something that Patricia and I have in common, is not feeling like we exactly belong in the place that we are from, but still have an affection for it and a gratitude to the people there who helped make us who we are.
how about you, Dan?
Well, so I have a tendency to want to write stories that I really probably have no business writing. A little bit of background: back in the mid 2000s, I got tapped to reboot a DC Comics character called Firestorm. Up to that point, he'd been a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, like stereotypical American jock. And I was like, can I make him somebody else? And the DC said, oh yeah, sure, yeah, do that. So he became a 17-year-old black kid from Detroit. And the commentary at the time was, how is this white dude from the South going to write this 17-year-old black kid from Detroit? And so I just called on relationships that I had with people that I knew, family members, and lo and behold, like, young black men would find me at conventions and say, this is really real. This is like real life stuff that you've got here. Well, fast forward many years, every member of the Sethid species is pansexual. They don't really, they're attracted to people. The set of genitals that comes with the people is kind of incidental. So the main character meets a human woman, and they fall in love over the course of the story. And, I'm like, yep, middle-aged, cishet, white guy here. Gonna try really, really hard not to screw this up really bad. But, just being honest, portraying a loving relationship. Loving relationships are kind of just loving relationships. I mean, yeah, there are lots of little details that change from one to another, but at the heart of it, humans, and as it turns out, Sethids, love each other, or they can love each other. And so that's also gotten some good feedback, to my intense relief.
I do think that's one of the things that's fun in writing, though, is, as a reader, one reason I love to read is to get to experience things that I can't, won't, or haven't experienced, to walk in another point of view for a while and get a sense of what it would be like to be that kind of person. And as a writer, I feel like I have the opportunity to have that same experience scaled even more because I'm responsible for sculpting it. And, not all of my characters are exactly like me, because goodness, how boring would that be? Of course I am fascinating, but there are plenty of books out there already about middle-aged white ladies. I'd like to have a little more variety than that in my own worlds, and it's an opportunity for me to learn. Because I'm a nerd. I like learning. I do. And writing is an opportunity to learn at a really deep level because you really have to know a lot about whatever you're doing to sell it. And like Dan was saying, there are definitely emotional resonances you can pull on within yourself because whether you are the kind of person you're writing about or not, there's going to be some human components that you have experienced that you could pull on. But there's also going to have to be some research and some conversation and some real empathetic imagining. And that's the fun part.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to wrap this one up. I think everybody's got a lot of stuff to be add to their to be read piles. But before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you, website, social media, and of course, to help promote that thing that they've got to go rush and get on their Kindle and get a signed print copy, because I feel sure everybody will sign one and ship. Not that I'd volunteer anybody for that or anything at all. So Samantha, how about you?
So thanks for having me. I am Samantha Bryant and I write hero and horror stories, which is also a description of my day job as a middle school Spanish teacher. And my main series is the menopausal superhero series. The first book is called Going Through the Change, if you want to start at the beginning. And the most recent book is called Be the Change. And currently there are 4 novels, 2 novellas, a set of short stories, and a book that gathers all the short stuff together into one volume for you. So you can find my website at samanthabryant.com. And you can find me on Twitter or Instagram as Samantha B. Writer, just the letter B there in the middle. And I'm over on Facebook as Samantha Dunaway Bryant because there was already some other Samantha Bryant.
How about you, Dan?
Thank you also for having me. My name is Dan Jolley, and that's Jolley, Jolley. You can find me at danjolley.com, where if you sign up for my newsletter, which is in a sort of a comic strip format in which you can see me argue with my cats and interview guest authors. If you sign up for that, you get I think I can call it a novella. It's 10,000 words. It's either a short novella or a long short story. Anyway, I wrote it exclusively for newsletter members. It's called The Last of the Electric Knights, and it's about a silver alloy robot built by Nikola Tesla to fight werewolves. And the book is The Rune Master Homicide. It is the first in a series. I am elbow deep in the second book right now. It'll be out later this year. And on my website, you can see basically everything else I've ever written as well. But please come visit, drop me a line. I will reply.
How about you, BL?
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And you can find me, my website is still I'm still in the process of working on it, but it's blmaxwellwriter.com. You can always find me on Facebook, BL Maxwell. I actually, right now, if you sign up for my newsletter, I have a weekly serial I've got going. So you get a chapter a week with it. So that's been kind of fun. And then I also have, and you can, if you email me, I'll get it to you, blmaxwellwriter@gmail.com. I have a little freebie also that you can get. So a few fun things. And then I have my next book that's coming out is a co-write with someone who's never written paranormal before, but she had this idea for this series. So I'm excited for it to come out. And it's actually a shifter series it's called The Slow Death. And there's a disease that they're battling that the more they shift, the more their disease progresses. So it was
Mhm.
kind of a fun book. So I'm looking forward to that coming out. So yeah, either drop me an email or Facebook. I'm always on Facebook, so that's probably the easiest place to find me.
And I've had the pleasure of being you guys' host this evening, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, speculativefictionacademy.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And I do haunt, Facebook, occasionally show up on that hive of scum and villainy that is Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever else I happen to be. So I want to thank both all of my guests tonight. And again, everybody go run out and add them to your to be read pile. And we will see you again soon. Thanks much for hanging with us. We'll see you.